My name is Emma, I am 28 years old, and I live in a quiet apartment in the city. Sign it or get out of this family. My father's voice shook the walls of the kitchen. He wasn't just angry, he was furious. Before I could even open my mouth to say no, his hand moved fast. The ceramic mug flew across the table. It hit me squarely in the chest. The coffee was boiling hot. I felt the liquid soak through my thin blouse instantly. It burned my skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, like fire spreading over my heart. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked down and watched the steam rise from my soaked clothes. My mother covered her mouth. My sister, Claire, looked at the floor, too afraid to speak. They all wanted me to save Claire's husband, James. They wanted me to sign a loan for a man who was drowning in debt and lies. They didn't know the truth I knew. They didn't know he was scamming them all. Dad breathed hard, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to apologize. Instead, I turned around. I walked to the door without saying a single word. My chest was burning, but my mind was cold. They thought this was the end. They didn't know that my revenge had already started. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? I wasn't always the invisible daughter. I wasn't always the one standing in the kitchen with coffee soaking into my chest while my family looked at me with hate. Once, I was the favorite. I need to explain how we got here. I need to explain how a family that looked perfect on the outside was actually rotting from the inside. Growing up, I was the fixer. That was my role. I was the oldest. I was the responsible one. My father, Robert, used to look at me with a specific kind of pride. It wasn't the warm, fuzzy kind of love you see in movies. It was practical. It was useful. When I was 12, I figured out how to fix the leaking sink when Dad was at work. When he came home, he inspected the pipes, nodded, and said, "Good job, Emma, you've got a good head on your shoulders." That was the currency of love in our house, usefulness. My mother, Susan, was different. For her, everything was about the image. She cared about what the neighbors thought. She cared about the lawn being mowed in straight lines. She cared about us wearing ironed clothes to the grocery store. She didn't care if we were happy as long as we looked happy. I helped her maintain that image. I made sure my grades were perfect. I made sure my younger sister, Claire, had her hair brushed. I was the glue. Claire was 5 years younger than me. She was the soft one, the dreamer. While I was fixing sinks and balancing Mom's checkbook at the kitchen table, Claire was drawing pictures or playing with her dolls. I loved her more than anyone. I remember one night when Claire was 10. She had a nightmare and came into my room. "Em," she whispered, climbing into my bed, "I'm scared." "It's okay," I told her, pulling the covers up. "I'm here. Nothing bad happens when I'm here." I believed that. I believed I could protect everyone. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was smart enough, I could keep my family safe and happy. Then James happened. It started 3 years ago. Claire met James in college. He was older, charming, and loud. Very loud. I remember the first time he came to dinner. I had spent all afternoon cooking. I made a roast beef exactly how Dad liked it. I set the table. I made sure the napkins were folded. I wanted Claire's boyfriend to be impressed. I wanted everything to go smoothly. James walked in wearing a suit that looked expensive but didn't quite fit right. He had a big smile and a handshake that was a little too strong. "Robert," he boomed, shaking my father's hand. "Claire has told me so much about you, the man of the house." My father stood up straighter. "Welcome, James." James barely looked at me. He handed his coat to Mom without asking and sat at the head of the table. That was Dad's seat, usually. But Dad just laughed and sat on the side. That dinner changed everything. For years, I had been the one Dad talked to about money, about politics, about the world. But that night, I couldn't get a word in. James talked about investments. He talked about crypto. He talked about future markets. He used big words that didn't actually mean anything if you listened closely. But Dad wasn't listening closely. Dad was listening with his ego. "I'm thinking of buying a plot of land downtown," James said, waving his fork. "Turn it into luxury condos. The return on investment would be huge, Robert." Huge, Dad's eyes lit up. He had always wanted to be a rich businessman, but he had worked a steady, safe job at the post office his whole life. He felt like he had missed out. James made him feel like he was part of the big game. "That sounds incredible," Dad said. "You really have vision, James." I tried to speak up. "But the zoning laws downtown are strict," I said quietly. "And the interest rates right now are," James interrupted me. He didn't even look at me, he just kept looking at Dad. Details, details. You have to think big to win big, right, Robert? Right, Dad said. He didn't look at me either. I looked at Mom. She was just smiling, happy that the men were getting along. She was happy that Claire had caught a successful man. Over the next few months, I watched my place in the family disappear. I became the boring one, the cautious one, the one who didn't understand business. Every Sunday dinner became the James show. He would come in with a new watch or a new story about a deal he just closed. He drove a leased BMW that he parked in the middle of the driveway, blocking everyone else in. "Sorry, Em," he'd say, tossing me his keys. "Move it for me, will you?" And I did. I moved his car. I washed the dishes while he drank Dad's best scotch in the living room. I heard them talking one night. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up. They were in the living room. "I wish I had a son like you," Dad told James. My hands froze in the soapy water. I stood very still. "You know," Dad continued, his voice low, she's a good girl, hard worker, but she doesn't have the fire. She plays it too safe. A man needs to take risks." "I get it," James said. "Women are naturally more timid, it's biology." "Exactly," Dad said. "You're the son I never had, James." It broke my heart. It didn't just crack it, it shattered it. All those years of fixing the sink, doing the taxes, being the responsible one, it meant nothing. Because I wasn't a man, because I wasn't a liar who promised millions. I looked at Claire. She was sitting on the arm of James's chair, looking at him like he was a god. She didn't see that he was rude to the waiters when we went out. She didn't see that he never actually paid for anything. She only saw the dream he was selling. I tried to warn her once. "Claire," I said one afternoon, "does James actually have a job? I mean, a payroll job?" She got defensive immediately. "He's an entrepreneur, Emma. You wouldn't understand. You're stuck in your 9-5 mindset. James is building an empire." "I just worry," I said. "He spends a lot of money." "It takes money to make money," she snapped. "You're just jealous because you're single and I found a high-value man." That hurt. "I'm not jealous, Claire. I love you. I just want you to be safe." "I am safe," she said. "James takes care of everything." But he wasn't taking care of everything. He was taking everything. By the time the wedding happened, I was completely pushed to the side. I was the maid of honor, but I felt like the help. I organized the vendors. I directed the guests. I fixed Mom's dress when the zipper broke. And during the speeches, Dad gave a toast. He spoke for 10 minutes about how proud he was to welcome James into the family. He talked about James's vision and strength. He didn't mention me, not once. I sat there smiling, clapping, while inside I was screaming. I realized then that I had lost them. They preferred the lie. They preferred the fake gold to the real thing. But I stayed. I stayed because of loyalty. I stayed because I still thought I could fix it if things went wrong. I didn't know how wrong things were about to go. The feeling of something being wrong started as a small itch in the back of my mind. It was little things at first. I still helped my parents with their finances. It was one of my chores that hadn't been taken away, probably because James found it boring. Dad would dump a shoebox of receipts on the table and say, "Sort this out, Emma." One Tuesday evening, about 6 months after the wedding, I was going through their monthly bank statements. My parents were comfortable, but not rich. They had a savings account they had been building for 30 years. It was their retirement fund. It was their safety net. I was scanning the withdrawal list when I saw it. Transfer $5,000. I frowned. My parents were frugal. They didn't spend $5,000 in one go, maybe a house repair, but nothing had broken recently. I marked it with a red pen. Then I saw another one, 2 weeks later. Transfer $3,500, and another. Cash withdrawal $2,000. My stomach dropped. In the last 3 months, nearly $15,000 had moved out of their savings account. I stood up and walked into the living room. Mom was watching TV. Dad was reading the paper. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm, "did you move some money recently for a project?" He didn't look up. "No, why? There are withdrawals," I said, "big ones. $15,000 in total." That got his attention. He put the paper down. "What? That's impossible. The bank made a mistake." "I don't think so," I said. "It says the transfers were authorized online." "I don't use online banking," Dad said. "You know that? I hate computers." "I know," I said, "but someone does." A cold silence filled the room. "James," Mom said softly. "James helped us set up the app on the iPad last month. Remember, Robert? He said it would earn us more interest." My heart started pounding. "James has your login." Dad waved his hand dismissively. James is a financial wizard, Emma. He probably moved it to a high-yield account for us. He's smart with money, unlike us. Dad, I said, my voice getting tighter, you need to ask him. That money isn't in a new account. It's gone. It was withdrawn as cash or transferred to an external account I don't recognize. Don't be paranoid, Dad snapped. You're always looking for reasons to tear him down. He's trying to help us retire in luxury. I'm not tearing him down, I insisted. I'm looking at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Drop it, Emma, Dad warned. I'll ask him on Sunday. I'm sure there's a simple explanation. I went back to the kitchen, but I couldn't focus. I knew in my gut. I started digging deeper. I knew Claire's passwords. She had used the same password for everything since she was 12, her first dog's name and her birth year. I shouldn't have done it, but I was desperate. I logged into her email. What I found made me sick. There were overdue notices, credit card bills for cards I didn't know she had, loan applications. And then I found the emails from James to a generic email address. He was forwarding bank statements, Dad's bank statements. He was altering the PDFs. He was changing the numbers to make it look like there was more money than there actually was. He was building a house of cards. I didn't sleep that week. I waited for Sunday. I needed to see him face to face. But before Sunday came, the crash happened. It was Thursday night. It was raining. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Claire. Emma, her voice was broken. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Claire, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm outside your apartment, she cried. I ran to the door. I opened it and found my sister standing in the hallway, soaking wet. She wasn't wearing a coat. She was shivering. I pulled her inside and wrapped a blanket around her. I made her tea. I sat her down on the couch. Tell me, I said. They took the car, she whispered. The towing company. They came in the middle of the night and took the BMW. Why? I asked, though I suspected the answer. James, he said it was a mistake, Claire sobbed. But the man. The tow truck driver. He said we haven't made a payment in 6 months. She looked at me, her eyes wide and terrified. Emma, James told me he bought that car cash. He told me he owned it. I held her hand. He lied, Claire. She started shaking her head. No, it gets worse. Today a man came to the door. He was looking for James. He said James owes him $20,000 for a business loan, he said. He said James signed a promissory note. She reached into her wet pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He showed me a copy, she whispered. Look at the signature. I took the paper. It was a loan agreement for $20,000 with a high-interest lender. The borrower's name was Claire Wilson. The signature was Claire Wilson, but it wasn't Claire's handwriting. It was jagged, rushed. I didn't sign this, Claire cried. I never signed this. He used my name. He used my credit. Emma, I checked my credit score tonight. It's ruined. It's gone. I have $300,000 in debt I didn't know about. She collapsed into my chest, wailing. He stole my life, Emma. He stole my name. I held her tight. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my stomach. This wasn't just being bad with money. This was criminal. This was identity theft. This was fraud. We have to tell Mom and Dad, I said, tomorrow. Dad won't believe it, Claire said into my shoulder. He loves James. He has to believe it, I said. We have proof now. The next morning, we drove to my parents' house. Claire looked like a ghost. Her eyes were swollen. We sat them down at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to do my homework. Claire told them everything. She told them about the car. She told them about the loans in her name. She showed them the paper with the forged signature. I watched Dad's face. I expected anger. I expected him to stand up and say, I'm going to kill him. But that's not what happened. Dad looked at the paper. He looked at Claire. Then he looked at me. You put her up to this, didn't you? Dad said to me. I blinked. What? You've been jealous of James since day one, Dad spat. Now you've got your sister worked up into a frenzy over some paperwork error. Paperwork error, I shouted. I stood up. Dad, he forged her signature. He stole her identity. The car was repossessed. Businessmen have cash flow issues sometimes, Dad yelled back, slamming his hand on the table. It happens. The market is volatile right now. James told me he's moving assets around. He's probably just leveraging debt. It's a strategy. It's theft, I screamed. He stole $15,000 from you too. Did you ask him about that? He explained it, Dad said. It's in a crypto wallet. It's tripled in value already. He's doing us a favor. I looked at Mom. Mom, you can't believe this. Look at Claire. Look at your daughter. Mom looked nervous. She smoothed the tablecloth. Well, James is very ambitious. Maybe we should just wait and let him explain. We don't want a scandal, Emma. We don't want the neighbors to see a tow truck. I felt like I was in the twilight zone. They were choosing the delusion. They were choosing the lie because the truth was too embarrassing. They couldn't admit they had been fooled. They couldn't admit their perfect son was a criminal. Claire was just crying silently at the table. Dad was glaring at me. I'm done, I said softly. I'm done trying to save you. Good, Dad said. If you can't support this family, then keep your mouth shut. Support this family, I laughed, and it was a bitter, sharp sound. I'm the only one trying to protect this family. James needs help, Dad said, his voice dropping to a serious, demanding tone. He called me this morning. He needs a bridge loan, just a small one, to unlock his capital. The bank needs a cosigner because his assets are tied up. I stared at him. No, I wasn't asking you, Dad said. I was telling you, we are all going to pitch in. We are going to help James get over this hump, and then we will all be rich. You need to sign. I will never sign, I said. We'll see about that, Dad said. I grabbed Claire's hand. Come on, Claire. You're coming with me. Claire looked at Dad, then at me. She pulled her hand away. I have to go home, she whispered. James said he'd be home at noon. I need to ask him. Claire, no, I begged. He'll just lie to you. I have to go, she said. She got up and ran out the door. I stood there alone with my parents. You're poison, Dad said to me, trying to turn a wife against her husband. I walked out. I sat in my car and screamed until my throat hurt. But then the screaming stopped, and the silence came. I realized that arguing wasn't working. Shouting wasn't working. Facts weren't working. They wanted a war, fine. But I wouldn't fight it with noise. I would fight it with paper. I would fight it with the law. I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. My mind was already working on the plan. I was going to burn James's world to the ground. And if my parents got singed by the flames, that was their choice. They were standing too close to the fire. This was the end of Emma, the fixer. This was the beginning of the prosecutor. I stopped answering my phone. For 3 days it rang constantly. Mom, Dad, they left voicemails. At first they were angry. Then they were demanding. Then they were guilt-tripping. Emma, you are breaking your mother's heart. Emma, pick up. We need to schedule a meeting with the bank. Emma, don't be childish. I didn't listen to them. I didn't delete them, though. I saved every single one. I was done arguing. I was done trying to convince them with words. My father had told me that I didn't understand business. He said I didn't have vision. So, I decided to use the skills I actually had. I was careful. I was organized. I was thorough. I took 3 days off work. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a pot of coffee, and a notepad. I treated James like a project. I treated him like a puzzle I had to solve. I started with public records. It is amazing what you can find if you just look. James had told us he owned a construction company. He said it was registered in the state capital. I went to the Secretary of State's website. I searched for his company name. Titanium Holdings. No results found. I searched for his name as a registered agent. No results found. He didn't have a company. He didn't have a business license. I kept digging. I paid $50 for a background check service. The kind that landlords use. I typed in his full name and his date of birth, which I knew from his birthday party last year. The report generated in about 5 minutes. I watched the progress bar load. My heart was beating slow and heavy. When the PDF opened, I froze. Civil court judgments, 4 evictions, 2 he had been sued 4 times in the last 6 years, not for small amounts. One was for $50,000 from an elderly couple in Florida. Another was for unpaid rent on a commercial property. He wasn't a rich investor. He was a man who moved from town to town, leaving debt behind him. I printed the report. Exhibit A next, I went back to the car situation. I called the dealership where he bought the BMW. I pretended to be Claire. I knew her social security number and her address. I know it was technically wrong to impersonate her, but I had to save her. I'm checking on the status of my loan, I told the agent. One moment, Mrs. Wilson, the man said. Ah, yes, we have sent this to collections. There hasn't been a payment made since the down payment. Who signed the lease? I asked. You did, ma'am, and your husband James is listed as a cosigner, but his credit check came back insufficient, so the loan is primarily in your name. Insufficient? I asked. Yes, his score was below 500. I hung up. My hands were shaking. James had told Dad he had perfect credit. He had told Dad the banks begged him to take money. The truth was, James couldn't buy a toaster on credit. He used Claire for everything. I printed the call log. I wrote down the details. Exhibit B. Then came the hardest part, the family money. I looked at the bank statements I had from my parents' house. I traced the transfers. They went to an account at a bank called First National. I couldn't access that account, but I could see the routing number. I searched the routing number online. It wasn't an investment account. It wasn't a crypto vault. It was a standard personal checking account. I looked at the dates. Every time Dad transferred money, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, James posted something new on Instagram. Transfer. October 4th. Instagram post October 5th. Photo of James holding a bottle of expensive champagne at a club. Caption, living the good life, number hustle. Transfer, November 12th. Instagram post November 13th. Photo of James with new golf clubs. Caption, only the best tools for the trade. He was spending my father's retirement money on drinks and toys. He was eating their future. I took screenshots. I matched the dates. I created a timeline. Exhibit C. By the third day, I had a stack of papers an inch thick. It was undeniable. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad luck. It was theft. I sat back and looked at my wall. I had taped the papers up, connecting them with sticky notes. It looked like a detective movie. I felt a strange sense of calm. For years, my family made me feel crazy. They made me feel like I was overly critical. They made me feel like I was the negative energy in the room. But looking at this wall, I knew I was sane. I was the only one who saw reality. I called a friend of mine from college, Sarah. She was a paralegal. Sarah, I said, if someone forges a signature on a loan application, what is that? That's bank fraud, she said immediately. And identity theft, it's a felony. Why? And if they coerce elderly people into transferring money under false pretenses? Elder abuse, she said. Financial exploitation. Emma, what is going on? I'm building a case, I said. Do you need a lawyer? Not yet, I said. First, I need to give them one last chance to see the truth. I knew my parents. If I just told them this over the phone, they would hang up. If I emailed it, they would delete it. If I sat them down, they would scream over me. James had brainwashed them too well. I needed to present it in a way they couldn't ignore. I needed to present it in a way that shocked them. I took a large brown manila envelope. I put everything inside, the background checks, the lawsuit records, the credit report showing James's score, the timeline of the stolen money matching his spending, the definition of forgery printed from the state law website. I sealed the envelope. I wrote one word on the front in thick black marker, truth. I looked at the clock. It was 11 p.m. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait. My father cared more about his reputation than anything else. He cared about what the neighbors thought. He cared about looking like the king of the castle. James had used that vanity against him. Now I was going to use it to save him. I packed a bag, not clothes. I packed a hammer. I packed 4 long steel nails. I dressed in black. I pulled my hair back. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the nice, helpful daughter anymore. I looked tired. I looked hard. I was ready to hurt them to save them. I drove to my childhood home at 4:30 in the morning. The streets were empty. The sky was that deep dark blue just before dawn. The streetlights were humming. It was the quietest time of the day. I turned onto Maple Street. The houses were all dark. Everyone was asleep. These were the neighbors my mother tried so hard to impress. The Johnsons next door. The Millers across the street. They all thought my parents were living the perfect life. I pulled up to the curb, but I didn't park in the driveway. I parked on the street, a little bit away from the house. I turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house. It looked so normal. The lawn was mowed perfectly. Dad probably did it 2 days ago. The flower beds were neat. It looked like a safe place. But inside, it was a disaster zone. Inside, my sister was crying herself to sleep next to a criminal. Inside, my parents were dreaming about money they didn't have anymore. I took a deep breath. The air in the car was cold. Do it, I whispered to myself. I grabbed the thick brown envelope and the hammer. I put the nails in my pocket. I got out of the car. I closed the door softly, not slamming it. I walked up the driveway. My shoes made a soft, crunching sound on the concrete. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I walked up the 3 steps to the front porch. I stood in front of the solid oak door. This was the door I had walked through 1,000 times. This was the door I used to decorate for Christmas. Now, it was a bulletin board. I held the envelope up against the wood, right in the center. right where anyone walking by would see it, right where the mailman would see it, right where the neighbors would see it if they looked over. I took the first nail. I placed it in the top corner of the envelope. Bang. The sound was loud in the silence. It cracked through the morning air like a gunshot. I paused. I waited to see if a light turned on inside. Nothing. They slept deeply. Dad snored loud enough to shake the windows, and Mom took sleeping pills. I took the second nail. Bang, bang, I drove it into the wood. I didn't care about damaging the door. The door didn't matter. The house didn't matter. The truth mattered. I put a nail in the bottom left corner, then the bottom right. The envelope was secured tight. It wasn't going anywhere. It was nailed to the entryway of their lives. I stepped back to look at it. The word truth stared back at me in bold black letters. It was aggressive. It was ugly. It was necessary. I knew what would happen when they opened the door. They wouldn't be able to miss it. They would have to rip it down. And when they ripped it down, they would have to open it. I turned around and walked back to my car. As I reached the sidewalk, I saw a light flick on at the Johnsons' house next door. A curtain moved. Mrs. Johnson was looking out. She saw me. She saw me walking away from my parents' door with a hammer in my hand. I didn't look away. I didn't hide. I just got into my car. I started the engine and drove away. I didn't go home. I went to a diner about 5 miles away. I ordered black coffee. I sat in a booth by the window and watched the sun come up. My phone was on the table, face up. I checked the time. 6:30 a.m. Dad usually woke up around 7 o'clock to get the newspaper. I sipped my coffee. It was hot and bitter. I imagined the scene. Dad opening the door in his robe, seeing the envelope, seeing the nails. The shock, the anger, he would think I was crazy. He would think I was vandalizing his house, but then he would open it. At 7:15 a.m. my phone lit up. Incoming call, Dad. I let it ring. It stopped. Incoming call, Dad. I let it ring again. Then a text message. Dad, what the hell is wrong with you? I didn't reply. Another text. Dad, you ruined the door. I took a sip of coffee. He was still focusing on the wrong thing. He was worried about the wood. He hadn't read the papers yet. 10 minutes passed. The phone stayed silent. I knew what was happening. He was reading. He was reading the credit report. He was seeing the lawsuits. He was looking at the dates. I waited. At 7:45 a.m. the phone rang again. Incoming call, Dad. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk. I had said everything I needed to say in that envelope. Then a call from Mom. Then a call from Claire. I stared at the screen. The screen was bright, flashing their names. The people who had ignored me for months were now desperate to reach me. I turned the phone over. I wasn't done. This was just the warning shot. Today was the deadline. Dad had told me I had to sign the loan papers today. He said I had to come over and sign them, or I was out of the family. Well, I was going to go over there. But I wasn't going to sign. I paid for my coffee. I left a good tip. I got back in my car. I needed to shower. I needed to change into my best clothes. I was going to go back to that house at 10 a.m. exactly when he asked. And I was going to finish this. As I drove, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I was making the moves. I was the one driving the car. They wanted a strong child. They wanted someone with guts. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. I arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. I pulled into the driveway. The envelope was gone from the front door. There were small scratches in the wood where I had hammered the nails, but the evidence itself had been ripped down. My stomach felt tight, like a fist was squeezing it, but my head was clear. I walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I used my key. I walked into the kitchen. They were all there. It was like a scene from a play. Dad was sitting at the head of the table. Mom was standing by the sink, clutching a dish towel. Claire was sitting next to James. And James. James was sitting there with a smug look on his face, drinking coffee. The thick brown envelope I had nailed to the door was sitting in the middle of the table. It was torn open. The papers were scattered. Everyone went silent when I walked in. You have some nerve, Dad said. His voice was low and shaking. Vandalizing my house, embarrassing us in front of the neighbors. Did you read it? I asked. I stayed near the door. I didn't sit down. I read your little project, Dad spat. He picked up the credit report and threw it back down. Fake, all of it. I looked at him, stunned. Fake, Dad, that is an official report from a background check agency. It has the seal. You can print anything off the internet these days, Dad said. James explained it to me. Identity theft is a real problem, Emma. Someone stole his identity. That's why those lawsuits exist. Someone is pretending to be him to ruin his reputation. I looked at James. He smiled at me. It was a cold, reptilian smile. It's true, Emma, James said smoothly. I've been battling these hackers for years. It's the price of being successful. People want to tear you down. I'm surprised you fell for it. I thought you were smarter than that. My jaw dropped. He had an answer for everything. And my father, my stubborn, prideful father, was eating it up. He wanted to believe the lie so badly that he was willing to ignore reality. And the money? I asked, looking at Mom. The $15,000 missing from your savings. Did hackers take that too? James is handling it, Mom said quickly, looking at her feet. He said he's tracking the hackers. He's going to get it back with interest. He spent it, I shouted. Look at the timeline. He bought golf clubs. He bought champagne. It's right there in the pictures. Enough, Dad slammed his hand on the table. He stood up. He looked big and scary, the way he used to look when I was a child and I had broken something. I am sick of your jealousy, Dad yelled. You are trying to destroy your sister's happiness because you are miserable. You are alone. You have nothing. James is trying to build a future for this family. He picked up a document. It was the loan agreement from the bank. The new one. The one they needed me to co-sign. We are doing this, Dad said. James needs this bridge loan to clear up the confusion with his accounts. Once he gets this, he can sue the hackers and get our money back. But he needs a co-signer with a clean history. He slid the paper across the table toward an empty chair. Sit down, he ordered. Sign the paper. I looked at the paper. It was for a $50,000 personal loan. If I signed it, I would be responsible for every penny. And I knew with 100% certainty that James would take the money and run, or spend it, and I would be left paying it off for the next 10 years. No, I said. What did you say? Dad asked. I said no, I repeated. My voice was steady. I will not sign. I will not help you ruin yourselves, and I will not let him steal from me. Dad's face turned red, a deep, dark red. The veins in his neck popped out. I am your father, he screamed. I put a roof over your head. I paid for your college. You owe me. I don't owe you my future, I said. And I don't owe him anything. If you walk out that door without signing, Dad threatened, pointing a finger at my face, you are done. You are no longer my daughter. You are no longer part of this family. I will write you out of the will. I will change the locks. You will be a stranger to us. I looked at Mom. She was crying, but she didn't say a word to stop him. I looked at Claire. She was trembling, looking at James, terrified. Claire, I asked softly, please tell the truth. Tell them about the car. Claire opened her mouth, but James put a hand on her shoulder. He squeezed it. I saw her wince. Claire trusts her husband, James said. That was it. I was alone. Fine, I said. If the price of being in this family is being a victim, then I don't want to be in this family. I turned my back on them. Sign it or get out of this family, Dad yelled again. I kept walking. Then I heard the movement. The scrape of a mug against the table. The rush of air. I didn't have time to duck. Smash. The heavy ceramic mug hit me right in the center of my chest. It didn't break, but it bounced off with a heavy thud. Then came the heat. The coffee was fresh. It was boiling. It splashed all over my neck, my chest, and my blouse. The pain was instant. It felt like someone had pressed a hot iron against my skin. It stole the breath from my lungs. I gasped, my hands flying up to my chest. The liquid soaked through my clothes, burning deeper every second. The room went dead silent. I stood there, my back to them. I squeezed my eyes shut. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. I refused to scream. I refused to give them the satisfaction of hearing me cry. Robert, Mom whispered, horrified. She made me do it, Dad stammered. She turned her back on me. I slowly lowered my hands. My skin was screaming in pain. I felt a blister already forming. I turned my head just enough to look at them over my shoulder. You didn't just lose a daughter, I said, my voice remarkably calm. You lost the only person who was trying to save you. I walked to the door. My chest was on fire, but my heart was cold as ice. I opened the door and stepped out into the fresh air. I walked down the steps. I walked down the driveway. As I reached my car door, I heard it, a scream. It wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of shock. It was Mom. Robert, the police, they're here. I didn't turn around. I opened my car door, sat in the driver's seat, and locked it. I looked in the rearview mirror. 2 police cruisers were pulling up to the curb, blocking the driveway. A third car, an unmarked sedan, pulled up behind them. I watched the officers step out. They weren't smiling. They walked straight up the driveway. I started my engine. I put the car in drive. I drove away slowly, leaving the chaos behind me. I drove 3 blocks and pulled into a grocery store parking lot. I couldn't drive any further. The pain in my chest was too intense. I looked down. My skin was bright red and blistering. I poured a bottle of cold water over it, trying to soothe the burn. I sat there, shivering, wet, and in pain. But I also felt relief. I hadn't just nailed papers to the door. That was for my parents. 2 days ago, when I was building the case on my wall, I had also made a phone call. I called the state attorney's office. I called the fraud division. I sent them everything. The forged signatures, the fake business records, the timeline. Because the amount was over $100,000 total, including the loans in Claire's name and the theft from my parents, it wasn't a small claim. It was grand larceny. It was wire fraud. I had given the police the address. I told them I would be there at 10 a.m. and that the suspect James would be there too. I checked my phone. It was blowing up. Mom calling, Dad calling. I let it ring. Then a voicemail popped up. I played it on speaker. Emma, Mom was screaming. I could hear shouting in the background. Emma, come back. They are arresting James. They are putting handcuffs on him. Tell them to stop. Tell them it's a mistake. I hung up. I stared at the dashboard. I can't tell them it's a mistake, Mom, I whispered, because it's not. 10 minutes later, another call. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. Hello, Miss Wilson, a calm, professional voice. This is Detective Miller. We met briefly over the phone. Yes, I said. We have secured the suspect. We also have your sister here. She's pretty shaken up. She says she wants to talk to you. Is she in trouble? I asked. No. It looks like she's a victim in this too. But we need her statement. She's asking for you. I closed my eyes. I'll come to the station. I won't go back to the house. That's fine, the detective said. We'll see you there. I drove to the police station. I sat in the waiting room. My chest was bandaged now. I had stopped at a pharmacy on the way to get burn cream and gauze. An hour later, I saw them. Officers were leading James down a hallway. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit jacket anymore. He was in handcuffs. He looked small. He looked pale. He saw me sitting there and his eyes went wide with hate. He mouthed something at me, but the officer pushed him forward. Then came my parents. They looked like they had aged 10 years in 1 hour. Dad was walking slowly, his shoulders slumped. He wasn't the screaming tyrant anymore. He looked like a confused old man. Mom was holding his arm, her makeup running down her face. And finally, Claire. She walked out with a female officer. When she saw me, she didn't run to me. She just stopped. She looked at the bandage on my chest peeking out from my shirt. She walked over slowly. He did it, she whispered. I know, I said. He admitted it, Claire said, her voice sounding hollow. When the police came in, he tried to run out the back door. He left me there. He didn't try to protect me. He just ran. She started to cry, but it was a quiet, defeated cry. He told the police. He told them I knew. He tried to blame me. He said I was the mastermind. My blood ran cold. He threw you under the bus. Yes, Claire nodded, but the detective didn't believe him. They have the emails. They know it was him. Dad was standing a few feet away. He couldn't look at me. He was looking at the floor tiles. Dad, I said. He flinched. He cleared his throat. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. He fooled us, Mom sobbed. He was so charming. You thought he was better than me, I said simply. You thought he was the son you wanted, and you were willing to let him destroy Claire and rob you blind just so you could keep pretending. Dad looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked at my chest. I hurt you, he said. Yes, I said. You threw boiling coffee on me because I tried to stop you from signing away your life. I'm sorry, he whispered. It was a weak, pathetic sound. I know you are, I said. But I'm not coming home. Emma, please, Mom begged. We need you. We have to figure out the lawyers. We have to figure out the money. We don't know how to fix this. This was the moment. The old Emma, the fixer, would have jumped in. I would have hugged them. I would have said, it's okay, I'll handle it. I'll hire the lawyer. I'll talk to the bank. I looked at them. I felt a tug in my heart, the old habit of wanting to clean up the mess. But then I felt the burn on my chest, the physical reminder of their betrayal. I can't help you, I said. What? Mom looked shocked. But you're the responsible one. You always fix it. Not this time, I said. I gave you the evidence. I gave you the warning. I did my job. Now you have to do yours. You have to fix your own mess. But we don't know how, Dad cried. Then you will learn, I said, just like I had to learn to survive on my own today. I turned to Claire. You can stay with me, I told her. If you want, but only you, not them. Claire looked at our parents, then she looked at me, she wiped her tears. Okay, she said, I'm coming with you. We walked out of the police station together. The automatic doors slid open and the bright afternoon sun hit us. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad. Dad, please come back, we are lost without you. I looked at the text. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I deleted the message. They were facing their own lies now. The illusion was gone. James was in a cell. The bank accounts were frozen. The neighbors knew the truth. Their world was crumbling. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding up the ceiling. I was watching it fall from the safety of the outside. 3 months passed. For the first time in my life, my calendar was empty of family obligations. There were no Sunday dinners to cook. There were no bank statements to organize for my father. There were no frantic texts from my mother asking me to settle an argument. My apartment was quiet. At first, the silence felt strange. I was so used to the noise of their drama that the quiet felt heavy. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for a crisis. But the crisis was happening 5 miles away, and I wasn't part of it. I didn't go back to the house. Not once. Claire was my only link to them. She was living on my pull-out couch for the first month, then she found a small studio apartment nearby. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office. It wasn't a glamorous job, and it certainly wasn't the luxury lifestyle James had promised her, but it was real. It was hers. One Tuesday evening, Claire came over for dinner. She looked tired, but she looked healthier. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. How are they? I asked. I didn't say their names. We both knew who I meant. Claire sighed and poked at her pasta. It's bad, Emma, it's really bad. Tell me, I said. I needed to know. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because I needed to know that my decision to leave was right. Dad barely leaves his bedroom, Claire said. He took a leave of absence from the post office. He says he can't face the guys at work. Everyone knows, Emma. The story about James's arrest was in the local paper. I saw it, I said. Local businessman charged with fraud and grand larceny. The neighbors stopped waving, Claire continued. Mrs. Johnson next door. She told Mom she didn't want to associate with a family that harbored a criminal. Mom cried for 2 days. They didn't harbor him, I said. They worshipped him. I know, Claire said, but they're paying for it now, literally. The lawyers for James. Well, James doesn't have any money. The court appointed a public defender, but Dad wanted to hire a private attorney to minimize the scandal. He spent the last of the savings on a retainer. I put my fork down. He spent the rest of the money James didn't steal. He thinks if he can get James a plea deal, it will go away faster, Claire said. Part of him still thinks James was just misguided. He can't accept that he was conned. If he admits James is a monster, he has to admit that he was a fool. I shook my head. He would rather go bankrupt than admit he was wrong. Mom misses you, Claire added softly. I stiffened. Does she? She talks about you all the time. She says the house feels empty. She says she doesn't know how to pay the bills online. She asked if I could ask you to come over just for an hour to show her how to log in. No, I said immediately. I told her that, Claire said quickly. I told her you weren't coming back. She cried. She said, but we're family. We were family when Dad threw boiling coffee at me too, I said. That didn't stop him. I touched the spot on my chest. The skin was still pink and tender. It was healing, but it would leave a scar. James has a hearing next week, Claire said. Are you going? No, I said. I gave my statement to the police. I gave them the evidence. I don't need to see him. I don't need to see his face to know I won. I have to go, Claire whispered. I have to testify against him to get my name off the loans. You'll be fine, I told her. Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do. A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at it. Usually, I let it go to voicemail. But this time, I felt a strange urge to answer. Maybe I just wanted to hear if her voice had changed. Hello, Emma. Her voice was small, weak. Oh, thank God you answered. What do you want, Mom? We received a letter, she said. From the bank, they are foreclosing on the house. I closed my eyes. Why? We took out a second mortgage, she confessed. 6 months ago. James said it was for an investment. He said he would pay the monthly installments. He never paid a single one. And you signed it. Your father signed it, she said. He didn't tell me until today. I can't help you, Mom, I said. We're going to lose the house, Emma, she started weeping. This is your childhood home. You can't let this happen. You have savings. You have a good job, please. Just a loan, we will pay you back. Like James paid you back, I asked. That's not fair, she wailed. We are your parents. And you watched your husband burn me, I said, my voice cold. You watched him abuse me for years, making me feel small so James could feel big. You chose him, you bet the house on him, now you have to lose it. You are cruel, she sobbed. No, Mom, I said. I'm just not the fixer anymore, I'm just a person, and I'm tired. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from adrenaline. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Saying no to a desperate mother feels unnatural. It feels like breaking a law of nature. But then I looked around my apartment. I looked at my paid bills on the counter. I looked at my clean kitchen. I had built this. I had protected this. If I gave them money now, I would be throwing it into a black hole. They wouldn't learn. They would just find another James. I blocked her number for the rest of the day. I went for a walk in the park. I watched the leaves falling. I realized then that fallout isn't just about the bad things happening. It's also about the dust settling. My parents' life was collapsing because it was built on a foundation of lies and ego. My life was standing strong because it was built on truth. It was painful to watch them fall. But I couldn't catch them. If I tried to catch them, they would just pull me down with them. 6 months after the incident. That's what I called it now, the incident. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I unbuttoned my shirt. The burn mark was there. It was an irregular patch of skin on my sternum, slightly lighter than the rest of my skin with a jagged edge. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just a mark, a souvenir. I traced it with my finger. For a long time, I thought loyalty meant lighting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I thought being a good daughter meant absorbing everyone else's pain. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was good enough, they would finally love me as much as they loved the idea of James. I was wrong. Loyalty without awareness is self-destruction. You cannot save people who are addicted to their own delusions. My father didn't love James. He loved the way James made him feel important. He loved the reflection of himself he saw in James's fake sunglasses. I buttoned my shirt back up. I looked at my eyes in the mirror. They looked different. Older, maybe, but calmer. I grabbed my keys and headed out. I was meeting Claire for coffee. We met at a small cafe downtown. Claire looked good. She had cut her hair short, a bob. It suited her. She looked professional. The divorce is final, she said as soon as I sat down. She slid a paper across the table. Congratulations, I said, I meant it. And James took a plea, she said. 5 years, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. It should have been more, I said. It's enough, she said. He's gone. He can't hurt us anymore. She took a sip of her latte. Mom and Dad moved. I nodded. I heard. They had lost the house. They sold it for less than it was worth to pay off the bank before the foreclosure was final. They were renting a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, a place where nobody knew them. There, adjusting, Claire said. Dad is actually talking to me now, really talking. He asked about you. I looked out the window. What did he ask? He asked if you were happy, Claire said. I thought about that. Was I happy? I didn't have a perfect family. I didn't have parents I could go to for Sunday dinner. I had a scar on my chest and a phone that I kept on silent half the time. But I had peace. I had my own money in my own bank account. I had sleep without nightmares. I had the truth. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him I am happy. Will you ever see them again? Claire asked. She didn't pressure me, she just asked. Maybe, I said. One day, when the scar fades a little more, but not yet. I'm not ready to go back into the fire. I understand, she said. We finished our coffee, we walked outside. I'm proud of you, Emma, Claire said. You saved me. If you hadn't nailed those papers to the door, if you hadn't forced the truth out, I would still be drowning, I would be in prison for debt. You saved yourself, Claire, I said. You walked away. We both did, she smiled. I watched her walk to her car, a used Honda she bought with her own wages. She looked strong. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. I thought about the old Emma. The Emma who fixed sinks. The Emma who balanced checkbooks. The Emma who begged for scraps of affection. She was gone. The new Emma was different. I was quieter. I was harder, but I was solid. I realized that forgiveness isn't about saying, what you did is okay. It's about saying, what you did no longer controls me. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned out, just like the coffee on my skin. Now there was just space. Wide, open space where I could build whatever life I wanted. My father wanted me to sign a loan to prove my loyalty. I refused. And in refusing, I signed a different kind of contract. A contract with myself. I promise to protect myself. I promise to see the truth. I promise never to let anyone treat me like an option in my own life. I started the car. The radio came on. It was a song I liked. I turned it up. I drove home, taking the long way, enjoying the drive, enjoying the silence, enjoying the fact that the only person I had to answer to was the woman in the mirror. I sit with my morning coffee. It's hot, but now it comforts me instead of burning me. The silence in my apartment isn't lonely, it's peaceful. I finally learned that walking away isn't weakness. It is the ultimate revenge. If you have ever been the fixer who was blamed for the mess, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. Please like and subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, sometimes, silence is the most powerful answer you can give.